Hello. I will be doing a book report on Thomas Pynchon's Inherent Vice. I will be mentioning one-star reviews. I will be talking about the movie by Paul Thomas Anderson as well, and this book report will contain spoilers. So I didn't get this book for $27.95. It's 2023 right now, and that's like 3 days of groceries, $27.95. I actually got this for $4.99 at the BMV. So I'm gonna give you my explanation of the plot, which is gonna be not straightforward at all. Yeah, so there's this stoner hippie detective who goes by Doc, real name Larry Sportello, and his ex-old lady Shasta Faye Hepworth comes to him asking for help. She reveals that she's having an affair with this popular real estate big shot guy named Mickey Wolfman. And this Mickey Wolfman guy is protected by the Aryan Brotherhood. Like, they are his bodyguards, basically. So Shasta thinks that Mickey's wife and her BF, so Mickey's wife is also having an affair, they're plotting to send Mickey away to a psych ward and run off with his riches. And Shasta thinks she's being followed, and that's why she's coming to Doc for help. Now, on top of this, there's this guy named Tariq Khalil, and he comes to Doc for help on finding a guy named Glenn Sharlock, but doesn't mention why. Glenn Sharlock just owes him something. And Glenn Sharlock is actually Tariq Khalil's former prison inmate, he's trying to reach Glenn, but Glenn is part of the Aryan Brotherhood, so he wants Doc to do that for him. Shortly after this, Shasta and Mickey Wolfman are reported missing, and Doc gets placed beside a dead Glenn Sharlock. Like, he gets set up beside Glenn Sharlock, who's dead. And there's this like Renaissance detective named Bigfoot Bjornson, and he dogs Doc about Glenn's murder and other things. Like, he's the prime suspect. On top of this, on top of all this, there's a woman named Hope Harlingen, and she comes to Doc asking him to investigate her supposedly diseased husband, Coy Harlingen. And he goes by other names like Rick Doppel and Chucky, which he has different identities as well. But one of his identities is that he was a musician, part of a band called The Boards, and he's doing surf rock. Now, Hope Harlingen, Coy's wife, asks Doc to investigate Coy because she thinks that Coy's death, his allegedly heroin overdose, is mysterious, and he might not be dead. So Doc investigates this. He's asked to investigate this. Oh, and throughout this entire like mess of events, there's this Indo-Chinese heroin cartel / boat / rehab center / group of dentists called the Golden Fang. Now, going all the way to the end, it turns out that Mickey Wolfman, the real estate big shot, he had a change of heart. So he was trying to clear out land. He was in the process of clearing out land for his own developments and to get richer. But he starts to have a change of heart and starts to feel guilty for selling real estate and felt that it should be distributed freely. His wife did not like the idea, so she plotted, his wife did not like the idea of him giving wealth away, so she plotted to basically kidnap him and send him to a rehab center so that this rehab center can fix his thoughts, can stop making him think that, to make him not give his riches away. It also turns out that Glenn Sharlock wanted to join the Aryan Brotherhood, and he needed to kill somebody as initiation, and this was while he was in prison. So he subcontracts this to his prison inmate Tariq Khalil. In return, Glenn Sharlock will provide him firearms. And Glenn gets killed for being a traitor because the Aryan Brotherhood finds out about this. And that's when he was lying dead beside Doc. And we also find out that Coy Harlingen faked his own death to get clean from heroin. I think. I may be simplifying that. And to protect his family. He worked as an informant for Vigilante California, which is, I think they're part of the LAPD. And we also learned that Bigfoot, this Renaissance detective, he was setting up Doc Sportello, the main protagonist, because he was aggressively nudging him to a certain direction in Doc's investigation. You see, Bigfoot Bjornson had a partner named Vincent Indelicato, and Vincent Indelicato, he had rivalry, he had a very heated rivalry with these two guys from the Aryan Brotherhood who are also from the Golden Fang, named Adrian Prussia and Puck Beaverton. And Vincent gets killed by one of those guys. And Bigfoot Bjornson nudges Doc towards those guys in Doc's own investigation and sets Doc up to kill those guys for him. And on top of that, Bigfoot Bjornson, he basically steals Golden Fang's heroin and he plants it in Doc's car, which is pretty fucking funny. Doc makes a deal with a Golden Fang to free Coy Harlingen from his informant job with no repercussions and allow him to be back with his family, Hope Harlingen, and they have a daughter. Now, the Golden Fang is suspected to be a group that sells heroin and then sells rehab to who they get addicted. Did you get all that? By the way, out of 9 books, this book is known as Pynchon's most accessible. It's the easiest to read, apparently, and that's why I love him. He creates this fun world you can fully immerse in, and it's difficult to understand, but when I make an effort to, I feel rewarded. And I don't even need to go deep to enjoy it. It can be like a surface level thing, and I'll still enjoy it. And this is one of the reasons I love literature. So anyway, that's my personal summary of the plot. Maybe for those of you who have read it, it could be like a refresher or whatever, but that's how I make sense of it. Anyway, so this story, I'll just spit at random points now. This story takes place in a fictional place in California called Gordita Beach, which is based off of Manhattan Beach in New York, where Thomas Pynchon actually lived. And there's actually a listing of the property he lived in, which is available, and like we know about it. And there's a map of the setting, which I'll provide. I like this, and the story also takes place during the time that Pynchon was working on Gravity's Rainbow, which is the book he's most popular for. I like how the word groovy was used a lot in this book. According to my Kindle searches, it's used 40 times in this novel. I like how the characters have interesting quirks. For example, Dinas, it's like Dennis, but pronounced penis, pronounced to rhyme with penis. So Dinas, his first of all, his name pronunciation. And I like how he bought 30 days worth of Chinese takeout, and that's like how he gets through the months. Like that's his meal prep, if you could call it that. Detective Bigfoot Bjornson, he is addicted to frozen chocolate-covered frozen bananas, and he collects Wild West paraphernalia, including barbed wire. And I like how his name is Bigfoot Bjornson. He has the nickname Bigfoot because he likes to stomp doors down to make his entrance when he's consulting with Doc, or in general, I think. I love the humor, how it's like it's like a witty stoner humor, basically. You know, like there's that part when Doc thinks that Sherlock Holmes is real, and he talks to Sancho about it, I think. Yeah, PI should really stay away from drugs. All them alternate universes just make the job that much more complicated. But what about Sherlock Holmes? He did coke all the time, man. It helped him solve cases. Yeah, but he was not real? What? Sherlock Holmes was. He's a made-up character in a bunch of stories, Doc. No, he's real. He lives at the real address in London. Well, maybe not anymore. It was years ago, but he has to be dead by now. And there's also that time when Doc bumps into Agent Borderline and Flatweed in Las Vegas, and the agents are explaining to Doc like what's going on with Mickey, like his change of heart. Do you know what he said? We have it on tape. I feel as if I've awakened from a dream of a crime for which I can never atone, an act I can never go back and choose not to commit. I can't believe I spent my whole life making people pay for shelter when it ought to have been free. It's just so obvious. You memorized all that? Another advantage of a marijuana-free life. You might want to try it. Or like Doc's acid trip, which was really funny. And then there's also like Doc talking to Sancho about Bigfoot being like Jewish or Swedish, about how there could be both, like that kind of dialogue. Hey, you think Bigfoot's Jewish too? Swedish, I thought. Could be both. Pat dimly defensive. There could be Swedish Jews. I know there's Swedish fish. Basically only trying to be helpful. And then there was this other passage about a character who couldn't boil water until he went to cooking school. And the movie was also on point with this like witty humor, witty dialogue kind of thing.
But do you think that Glenn and Shasta were F-U-C-K-I-N-G-E? Fucking?
This is what we had her looking like. Everybody helpfully pointed out how the heroin was actually coming through my breast milk, but who could afford formula, you know?
Choto, Kinichiro, Dozo, Moto Panekeku, Moto Panekeku, Moto Panekeku.
Did I get you?
Inherent Vice has this like wholesomeness to it. A lot of the characters, some who happen to be hippies, they all mean well. It's like a wholesome hippie mystery novel with witty stoner humor. So for example, Larry Doc Sportello, he's investigating hard to get his ex-old lady Shasta Faye back, like to find her. And he's making a deal with Golden Fang for Coy Harlingen's freedom, instead of like money. So that's a pretty selfless act. There's Mickey Wolfman, who felt guilty about demolishing land to expand his real estate and selling it, and so he sought out to give away his fortune by creating free land in the desert. Coy Harlingen, he wanted to get clean and keep his family safe. Bigfoot Bjornson, he wanted revenge for murder of his former detective partner, Vincent Indelicato. And then there's Aunt Reet, who promised Almina to not get Doc in trouble, Almina being Doc's mom. Another wholesome thing I find about this story is the part when Doc's parents came over to visit him and like chat. I found that very wholesome. So now I'm going to talk about some references that this book made that that I found interesting and that like led me to other media, other pieces of media or other things. First of all, this led me to Charles Manson, and he's a short guy who was very charismatic and influential, and he brainwashed people to commit brutal murders. He was actually portrayed on the show Mindhunter, and the story takes place after all that craze. You can look into it more. I'm not into that stuff. That stuff's pretty like wacky and like dark, honestly. I'm not like a true crime enthusiast. Like I'm into it, but I'm not like crazy about it. I find it pretty like messed up. Now, this also led me to Italo Calvino's book, The Complete Cosmic Comics, which I'm currently reading actually, if you can see. So the reason why I like this Inherent Vice led me to The Complete Cosmic Comics by Italo Calvino is because it's related to Doc's acid trip in chapter 7, where his name 3 million years ago was like XQQ or something, like an unpronounceable name. And it's similar to the book's protagonist in this book, because the protagonist in this book is named QFWFQ. And this book also has many characters whose names are not pronounceable. I'm actually still reading it now. I haven't dug deep into Calvino yet, but his work is really trippy so far. It's basically, so this book is basically a short story collection where each story starts with a scientific hypothesis, and the story is based off of this hypothesis. And for example, like I'll tell you my favorite ones so far. There's a story about how the moon used to be super close to the Earth, and so close that it was climbable, and people were rowing like on the ocean towards this moon so that they could go on it and collect moon milk. There's another story about the main character, and the main character is consistently this QFWFQ guy. And so there's this other story about him where his uncle basically cucks him, okay? Like, the protagonist is a land mammal in the story who thinks that being an aquatic creature is like a de-evolution, like a step backwards into evolution. He meets a female romantic partner who's also a land mammal, and the protagonist has an uncle who's a fish, and this uncle takes pride in like the abilities of aquatic creatures, and he doesn't care about being perceived as like a de-evolution, and he talks down on land mammals. And the protagonist's female romantic partner becomes super interested in aquatic creature life, like the lifestyle, like she wants to learn how to swim and do aquatic creature things, learning from the uncle. So she learns from the uncle, and she slowly drifts from the protagonist. And there's this other story about a dinosaur who tries to fit into a society of non-dinosaurs, what was I talking about? This book also led me to Pynchon's articles. I did not even know that he wrote articles, by the way. But it led me to his article on the Watts riots, which is what Doc's initial conversation with Tariq Khalil's was based off of, and the Halifax explosion, which is what the Golden Fang, the boat, survived. And it's a pretty tragic fucking story, like a tragic event. This led me to making chocolate-covered frozen bananas and the song "Sugar Sugar" by the Archies. I don't know why they go together. Like when I'm making these chocolate-covered frozen bananas, I'm playing that song in my head or on Spotify as I'm making them.
Honey, oh, sugar, sugar, you are mine.
It's a good song, and they are definitely a good treat, and they're relatively easy to make, but it's just a bit time consuming, I'd say, and messy. Depends how competent you are. This book has also led me to the film Black Narcissus, which was made in 1947 because Eddie spoke about it. I think Downstairs Eddie, Doc's like downstairs neighbor or some shit. Have you seen Black Narcissus, 1947? Eddie, who was enrolled in a graduate film program at SC, let out a scream of recognition. He's been working on his doctoral dissertation, Deadpan to Demoniac, Subtextual Uses of Eyeliner in the Cinema, and had just in fact arrived at the moment in Black Narcissus, where Kathleen Byron, as a demented nun, shows up in civilian gear, including eye makeup good for a year's worth of nightmares. I thought it was an alright film. Like the plot and all that, they were okay to me, and like the things going on, but what was really outstanding about it, I found, was the setting. This movie, Black Narcissus, is basically about a group of nuns who wanted to make like a healing place up in like the mountain, and and they go insane due to the isolation, like gradually. And there are interesting characters in it, definitely, and interesting dialogue, but if I have to be honest, it's not like shockingly wow. I'd say it's passable, and I wouldn't have really watched it if it wasn't for Pynchon. There's also the film that I added. There are also the films that I added to my to watch list. I haven't gone into them yet. The Roman Holiday and Jirad, the three-headed monster, because Doc was explaining to Penny that the three-headed monster is actually a remake of Roman Holiday. So yeah, I haven't watched it yet, so I can't really say anything more, but I'll get to it someday. Now, there are some differences between the book and the movie I want to point out, but I did like them both. The thing is though, like, my perception of the characters is really inspired by the movie. Like, the actors who played them, the actresses who played these characters, like, that's who I think of when I read the book. So, some things. Bigfoot Bjornson's chocolate banana addiction, like his frozen chocolate banana, his chocolate covered frozen banana addiction wasn't depicted at all, or how he gets all the bananas. I found that pretty interesting when the book described it. Doc meeting his parents was not shown at all, like, or any history about Elmina and Leo Sportello, because I found it like a cute detail how that was added and how they interacted. You know, the stoner hippie talking to his parents. How Doc and Sancho met was not shown or explained at all. Like, you know, they met at the supermarket and Sancho was like getting into marijuana and he wanted to buy like this thing, this like flour sift for weed, but he was scared that, he was paranoid that he was going to be discovered, like why he really wanted to buy it, which was for weed related stuff. So he bought other things to like disguise that, and it's just paranoia in his head. And he bumps into Doc, who's having a midnight chocolate deficiency, and they just click, you know. And yeah, I found it pretty fucking funny. I also found Sancho's rants pretty funny, like how he rants about Donald Duck before like when Doc calls him, like when Bigfoot takes Doc in for the murder of Glenn Charlock, and Doc calls Sancho, who's his lawyer. Sancho goes on a rant about how Donald Duck, like his shaving habits, and maybe it's like an expectation of Donald Duck's partner and all that. And Doc's like trying to like tell him, like, dude, come to the place, like I'm in trouble right now. And Bigfoot's got that look, and Sancho just keeps going on and on about his rant, like, well, I'm watching cartoons here, okay? And it was also funny how Sancho was ranting about the Wizard of Oz in color. That was not shown at all. That was funny too. It makes me wonder how color film is perceived in general, like when it first came out. Like people used to all this black and white film that gets that, and then color film coming out. Like I wonder how shocking that was. Terry Khalil's and Clancy Charlock's intimate relationship in Doc's office. Clancy Charlock being Glenn Charlock's sister. How she prefers 2 at a time, and how she describes Terry Khalil as at least 2 at a time. I found that pretty funny too. The movie also left out Doc's entire trip to Vegas. Like when he was looking for Mickey, when he like joined that bet about like Mickey missing or something, him running into borderline and flatweed and like trying to escape. Doc's acid trip was pretty funny too, which was omitted from the film, but that was pretty funny as well. You know, 3 million years ago, and all that shit. Yeah, that was cool. And just like a minor nitpicky detail, Doc's shootout with Puck and Adrian was more elaborate in the book. Like one of them survived, and they kind of chased each other a bit. And it could have been a hallucination though. Some resources I turned to film this are the podcast Pynchon in Public, which I didn't finish, to be honest. And then Reddit actually did a read along with it on r/Thomas Pynchon, and it was very informative and cool to see what other readers of it have to say. Like, who the fuck else reads Thomas Pynchon? Like, how many? Like, you can't just find anybody in your circle or in general who reads it. So it's nice to have this community, and I really like Reddit. It's where I spend most of my life in, you know, deep into internet arguments, getting offended and stuff like that. It's also my main source for world news. And there's also a beautiful, informative Inherent Vice wiki, which I turn to. And there are also a bunch of other resources, like there was this resource that explained the plot, the 5 plots, and had like character diagrams of it too. I'll make like a Notion page with all this shit and link it in the description. So next steps after Inherent Vice, I'm gonna read The Crying of Lot 49, and that'll be my second Pynchon read. I've read Pynchon before, I was just half paying attention and I wasn't super into it. But now I'm like going through Pynchon's works and actually like being fully focused and diving deep until it stops becoming fun. And that's how I'm gonna progress. So I'm gonna read The Crying of Lot 49, and I'm excited to read that. I have a fire-looking copy. I think like to appreciate Pynchon's, like a book of Pynchon, you gotta read all his other books, because like to see like the similarities and the differences, like sometimes there are reoccurring characters, I believe, or like the themes, you know. So I think reading a book, it's like, I think like Inherent Vice, to truly appreciate it more, I'd have to read like V, for example. I'd have to read Gravity's Rainbow. I'd have to and see what those are all about, and then I could see like the similarities, reoccurring things that make Pynchon Pynchon. So yeah, looking forward to that. So to end this video, I'd like to read a letter from Thomas Pynchon to Donald Barthelme for missing the postmodern dinner. Like he got invited to this like dinner and he missed it. Hello Don, by the time your kind invitation caught up with me, it was already too late. On May 17th, I was between coasts, Arkansas or Lubbock or someplace like that, so I couldn't have been there anyway. But thank you for asking me. Since I'm feeling more and more these days like a one-shot flash-in-the-pan amateur, it is at least a pleasant fantasy for me to think about mingling with you professional folks. Very likely the last such ever to be held. Ominous words. Say it ain't so. I'd rather think of it as a first annual. How'd it go? Or will I be reading about it in the People magazine or the New York Review of Books, if I got that right. I thought I saw you on the street once last year, or maybe the year before, in the village, but on the off chance it was Solzhenitsyn, I failed to say hello. Another social lapse. I'm sorry. How are you, anyway? Change mail drops, see above, but still have no fixed address. It would be nice to hear from you again, though whether you'd hear from me is problematic, what with this decade of writer's block I seem to be having and all. Anyhow, cheers, Thomas Pynchon.